What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the PFF NFL show, recapping day 2 of the Senior Bowl here in Mobile, Alabama. Dalton, Wasserman, Max Chadwick, Trevor Sikkema here with you guys to do all of that. We're going to break down a lot of what we saw here on day 2, but also a culmination of what we saw on day 1 as well. These guys are building out sort of profiles for the week, how well they are playing, and we actually really get to talk about who is standing out at this point in time before we kind of wrap everything up after day 3 tomorrow. Fellas, how we feeling? Sun was out today. It was great. You don't look too bad, Max. You don't look too bad.
Dude,
I was worried about you there after the first practice.
Listen, we saw a lot of dominant reps out here today. I think the most dominant rep all week has been the sun against me. I have been getting cooked out here right now. It is really – my mom is probably going to be texting me afterwards just being like, where's your sunscreen? I'm like, Ma, I forgot. I thought I was tougher than the sun, and I'm not tougher than the sun. I'm getting destroyed right now.
Mama Chadwick, I tried. I did. In between the practices, I was letting them know. I was like, yeah, buddy, you're kind of cooking a little bit here, but you don't look too bad, which is good. Dalton, how you feeling today?
I'm just sweating. Of course, I'm always in.
You were a vet. You were like, I'm not getting burned here at all today. So you were wearing the long sleeve no matter how hot it was.
I've learned in my days from going to like multi-day music festivals, you can't get roasted on day 1. Okay, then tomorrow we might go shorts and t-shirt and let it fly. But I'm in my usual all black like always. I'm sweating my ass off.
Coachella? You going to Coachella? What are you going to?
Yeah. No, he's an ultra guy. No. Big rave guy. No, he looks like a big rave guy, doesn't he?
Rockfest, man. You already know where that goes.
No, you're glow sticks, neon, glitter.
Oh, hell no. Yeah. Absolutely. Headbanging for 8 hours straight.
No, I don't know. I think he's a glitter guy. Here. No, all right. So let's get into some of these prospects. Let's talk about who's standing out here this week. Dalton, I'll start with you. I'll allow you to set the tone, so we don't have to go off of that too much in this show here. Wide receiver position, it felt like there were a lot of guys that were really standing out today between both of the teams. And it was nice to see a lot of the playmakers be able to separate themselves. It didn't feel like we had a lot of that from day 1, but these guys got very comfortable. I know there's 2 guys that really stood out to you, 2 guys that we have talked about throughout all the college football season, and that's the Iowa State guys. Tell me about them and how they played this.
2 guys from the same school that were fantastic today. We'll start with Jayden Higgins. Both of them over 1,000 yards. Jayden Higgins, 6'4", big body target. Had some trouble separating in day 1, but was a lot better today. Had a great vertical rep on the outside against Tommy Hill. Ran a nasty whip route in team drills that got him wide open. He just showed a lot better route running today. It looked like he was breaking down a little bit more. I don't know if he was just kind of not feeling it yesterday or if something was up, but it just looks so much better. The improvement in his route running, and that's going to be the big thing as a 6'4" receiver like that. We know he's a big-bodied pass catcher with a good catch radius. Got fantastic hands. We know he can be as reliable as it gets as long as he gets open. He got consistently open today, and it was a fantastic practice for him. Jaylin, Noel, a little bit smaller, probably going to be in the slot, but I like the work he's putting in on the outside. Again, fantastic route running today. Had a great contested catch down the sideline against Ezeiruaku Thomas. I thought the 2 Iowa State guys really stood out amongst a loaded group of receivers on the national team.
Yeah, it was almost like a Freaky Friday situation with the 2 of them, right? Because Jaylin, known as the route runner who's going to get open at all costs, but he had it, like you said, that contested catch he had was unbelievable. And Jayden Higgins is a guy who's a great contested catch guy, and like I said, yesterday the separation wasn't great. Today you separated a lot better, right? Yeah. So it was really cool to see both of them kind of improve on what we saw from yesterday.
Also, elite reference. Well done there. That was good with the Freaky Friday reference.
Yep.
That was actually spot on.
That's one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, in the top 10.
Love that movie.
Top 10.
Yes.
All right. I wasn't expecting that. I was not expecting that here on this show.
That might be hyperbole, but it's
it might be a little hyperbolic. We might actually have to revisit this one at this point. We might have to edit that part out of the show. We got to go back to the tape and figure it out, quite literally. Dalton, when we were watching these 2 guys in the middle of the season, I knew who Jayden Higgins was. He was more of the known NFL name during the season for Iowa, and as they were starting to have a really good season this year. you told me about the other guy. You told me about Jaylen Noel, and you're like, you got to watch this guy as well. I think he's a future NFLer. I remember watching both these guys, and I like Jayden Higgins a lot. But then in the middle of the season, I watched Jaylen Noel. I was like, I might like Jaylen Noel better. And then now, just a couple of weeks ago, going through wide receiver final evals, I ended up with Higgins higher than Noel. But then here at this event, day one, I was like, okay, wait a second. Now I like Noel more than Higgins. So at this point, I guess it's not about subtracting one for the other. It's just that both of these guys are really good football players. And I agree with you. I think that it was great to see Higgins stand out because I was gonna be worried about him with his athleticism if he wasn't able to stand out at some point here, especially after what we saw on day one, because he's not the best athlete, but he wins with that footwork, a variety of different releases. He knows how to get off press coverage. He's got those long arms. He's got those active hands. And then you mentioned how he is with contested catches. He really didn't get a chance to showcase that yesterday, but we saw a little bit better play from him today when it came to those separation aspects of it. So to me, that was, if you were going to ask me, hey, what does Jayden Higgins need to prove the most in Mobile at the Senior Bowl? It would be that separation aspect. What are you like when these DBs, it's just you and them one-on-one. They're only focusing on you. It's not zone coverage situations. And we didn't see that day one. We saw that more of from day two. Max, who is your first guy that you want to talk about?
I got to shout out Mike Green, the edge defender from Marshall. He had the most dominant rep, I think, at practice today. And against Josh Connerly Jr., by the way, who everyone thinks is going to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. He bulldozed him today. Mike Green had a good day yesterday, obviously. He's the highest graded edge in college football this past season, the only edge in college football with 90-plus pass rushing and run defense grades. You have him, I believe, as a top 15 prospect on your big board right now.
Yep.
And against a guy like Josh Connerly Jr., who, like I said, is no slouch, right? That is a guy who's probably going to be a top 25 pick in the NFL draft, and Mike Green just dominated him one-on-one today. So, yeah, the measurables for Mike Green weren't the best, but it's good to see, because I know that kind of the big question with Mike Green has been, okay, he comes from Marshall, he comes from the Sun Belt, how's it going to look like in an all-star setting? And he showed that, hey, I'm still a dominant football player. I'm still one of the best players in the draft. That rep alone by Mike Green was unbelievable today.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody in the stands as I was watching practice, and they were kind of just like, hey, what's your just overall approach of how you watch these events? And the answer that I had from him is very simply, you're trying to just figure out who's NFL players and who aren't.
Yeah.
Right? And then sort of like within that, you could talk about certain winners and how they're winning and how translatable it is. But at a very base level, when you come to this All-Star event, is who's an NFL player, who isn't.
Yep.
Mike Green, very clearly an NFL player.
And Connerly is too.
And you're right.
Like, you're it's just insane that you could have that dominant rep against a guy that so many people think is like maybe even OT1. I've seen some people have in this draft class, and the fact that he just it was one rep, I get it, but there's not that many reps for each of these guys out here.
It was more than just one. That was the most dominant rep.
He's been doing all week.
Eye-popping rep, but you're right. That was one of many.
No, I think it was one of the themes of this morning when you have the early practice yesterday where the offensive line dominated the defensive linemen so much, and it wasn't just Green. There was multiple players, I thought, on the defensive line this morning that got after it. It was just an extra level of energy today that even the playing field made it a really fun practice to watch. But Green is definitely the headliner. He was one of the headliners coming into this, and now he's only improved his stock. I even wonder if he could check out for the week, honestly, if he's locked up a first-round pick with how he's played today.
Yeah.
Not to mention like a power element that you don't really see that much in his tape either, right? Mike Green's a guy that kind of wins off finesse, off left speed, but that bull rush I thought today, that showed off a different element to his game that I didn't really see too much on his tape.
It was nice to see the defense fight back, right?
Yeah.
Because I think we talked about this on yesterday's show. It's not often that on day one of an all-star event, the O-line is the position that really stands out. And yesterday we were talking about a lot of different O-linemen. They were able to play really well. I mean, Connerly was one of them who played well. Gray Zabel was obviously somebody that we highlighted yesterday too. And so I felt like there were just a handful of offensive linemen that were really standing out on day one, which you don't really see. Normally, day two is the day the offensive linemen stand out. So I was wondering if it was just going to be much of the same, and we were just going to see a really good O-line group here in Mobile. And not that they're not great, but for the defensive line, I think whoever's coaching the defensive line, I can't remember who's coaching that group, I think they went to these guys last night and said, all right, it's time to fight back.
Yep.
These dudes are taking money out of your pocket. You better figure it out. You better come out like a bat out of hell on day two. And Mike Green was sort of the leader of that kind of play style and mentality. But it was beyond just him. I felt like there are other edge rushers that played well too today.
Absolutely, yeah. And to stick up for Josh Connerly a little bit, He was, I think, on right tackle in that rep, which he didn't play at Oregon. So it's a different footwork for him. So obviously Josh Kine was still a phenomenal prospect. But, yeah, that Mike Green and a lot of other guys, I'll get into another guy later on in the show that I thought was really good at edge defender as well. You're right, because yesterday the offensive lineman dominated, and usually a drill that's not designed for offensive linemen to dominate, and the defensive line kind of evened it out today, I thought.
Before we get too far away from this, Carl in the chat is saying Jayden Higgins potentially to tight end. Like he's more than a tight end player.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think that just because he doesn't have that natural separation in his game doesn't immediately say like, okay, well, let's throw 25 pounds on him and try to make him a tight end. I think it's just sort of who he is as a wide receiver, and you got to be okay with that. That's not the worst thing in the world. It's just a certain archetype of a wide receiver. You probably want him to play more as an X, like stay strong, be in those contested catch situations, and that's all right, and play towards the sideline. But Dalton, you said no as well when it comes to potential.
At the end of the day, a guy with that size, that catch radius, and those hands, if you're a B-level separator, you're going to be just fine in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to ever see him just torching guys on double moves, although it's kind of what we saw today on the stutter and go. But it's just he doesn't have to consistently separate at the level of a Tyreek Hill or something like that. It's two different ball players, right?
Yeah.
You just have to understand what type of receiver he is and how you can create ways to, help him separate and get the right matchups for him. But all he's got to do is get a step, and that catch radius is going to get him where he needs to go.
I'll stick on the wide receiver train for the first guy that I want to talk about, and it's somebody that we highlighted yesterday, Jack Bech from TCU. He played at LSU before he was at TCU, and he gave us a play of the day yesterday. I mean, depending on which side of the ball you're watching, because T.J. Sanders, bull rushing Dellinger, the interior offensive lineman, that was also a fantastic play. But it was that deep crosser catch over the middle, that full extension, body control coming down with it yesterday that we saw from Jack Bech. It was like, man, that's one of the best plays that we saw today, or on Tuesday. Today, I think was even better. He had another play that could have been considered play of the day with a catch towards the sideline with two defenders kind of hanging all over him, and he's able to come away with it. But just consistently, I remember last year at this event, Ladd McConkey's here, and you could tell no defensive back wanted to line up against Ladd McConkey because they understood, hey, everybody's got their phones out, everybody's recording all of these reps. Nobody wants to get cooked. Nobody wants to get put on the bad end of a highlight reel, and that's what Ladd McConkey was able to do. I'm not saying he's as quick, as good of a separator as a Ladd McConkey because he's bigger. He's not that build of a player, but when Bech lines up against these defensive backs, I think that it's that same feeling of like, oh boy, here we go. Like, what's going to happen here? Because whether it's been in-breaking routes, out-breaking routes, things are a little bit more vertical. This dude just knows how to win, and he's a shade over 6'1". He's 212 pounds. He feels like he's got so much versatility to him, and I don't know if I'm literally just thinking of this in my head as I've watched the last couple of days. But when you think of usage, Chris Godwin is somebody who the Buccaneers have used on those in-breaking routes, over the middle, strong at the catch point, knows how to kind of create that little subtle separation, but then also what you can do with him as a blocker in condensed sets, almost like that pseudo, smaller, tight end type of a feel to where you don't want him blocking against defensive ends like true tight ends sometimes, but you can have him climb to the second level and block some linebackers, block some safeties that might be close to the line of scrimmage. And so now you're talking about an extremely well-rounded profile for a guy like Bech, who I think is only going to continue to climb these wide receiver rankings the closer that we get to draft weekend. Because I think he's going to become a fan favorite and a team favorite, and this week is showing us that as well.
You mentioned Chris Godwin. One of the guys I thought about watching his tape too was Jacoby Myers, who maybe doesn't wow you with one singular trait, one A-plus trait, speed or size or anything like that, but he's kind of B to B-plus across the board, and he's an A-plus competitor, and that's what we're seeing with these contested catches out here. If he's going to make them every single day, we just keep going. Man, he just makes plays somehow, some way. You mentioned a jump ball down the right sideline here. That was essentially just a balloon that was thrown up as a Hail Mary late in the play to see what could happen, and he made it happen. I mean, he just, on the American team that's been practicing, in this second practices in the afternoon, he's been by far the best receiver. It's not even close. And you mentioned it. I don't know if I'm a DB on that side if I want to seek him out and keep getting burned one-on-one because he's been the best receiver for that team.
Yeah, I like Jack Bech a lot. And, I know a lot of people like his teammate, Savion Williams, a little bit more. But when I watch the tape, I mean, yeah, Savion Williams is definitely a flashier player. But like Dalton just said, I mean, all-around receiver, other Jack Bech is. And I thought he showed it today, honestly. The route running, you mentioned the contested catches before. he's absolutely making a lot of money this week.
Yep. All-Star game versus All-Star game. I would love to see Kobe Bryant, who we saw this past weekend at the Shrine Bowl, go up against Jack Bech. When you talk about like no DB maybe wants to line up against him, I guarantee you Kobe Bryant wants to line up against him. Kobe Bryant might be like sitting in his house like, call me up. Get day 3. Just give me one practice.
Kobe would line up against the Incredible Hulk if you like.
It's very true, but he was a standout during the Shrine Bowl practices, and like he's somebody that I'd pay a pay-per-view like to watch just a series of one-on-ones against these two.
Kobe Bryant used to DM me on Twitter when I was coming out with my top 10 players at every position. He goes, dude, if I'm not a top 10 corner, like you don't know what you're talking about, bro. Like all the time, he's like, when the corner list dropping, when's it dropping, when's it dropping?
He's locking you down.
No, he's locking me down. Yeah, Kobe Bryant, he is the absolute man on and off the field. I mean, the trash talking is phenomenal, but you need to have that as a cornerback,
100%.
Right? You need to have that kind of mentality.
You do.
I love Kobe Bryant, man. You're right.
No, it would be great to see those two go up against each other. Two future pros, there's no doubt about it. But Bech has been fantastic from this event. Before we get to Dalton's next guy that really stood out from day 2 of Senior Bowl coverage, this podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Cherry Bundy. They are the performance drink that is fueling the Health Elite revolution. Natural products in there, natural ingredients, no added sugars to it. The tart cherries that it's made with, highest antioxidant fruit or vegetable in the world. That means it's got all sorts of benefits to it. Reduces soreness, increases recovery, helps support immunity, even has that naturally occurring melatonin to help improve sleep. You can check it out on cherrybundy.com. Look at all the different products that they have. You know, sometimes they're products that'll help you give you a little bit more energy for a workout. Sometimes it's recovery afterwards. Sometimes it's products that are specifically to help you sleep. They've got everything that you want. If you live any sort of active lifestyle whatsoever, you got to check it out. I've had them before. They taste fantastic. They are great. Used by nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams, every NFL team, 10 of the last 11 Super Bowl champions. Products are available, like I said, cherrybundy.com, Amazon, retailers nationwide, so you can check out your local Publix, Kroger, whatever it is where you live, see if they have it, and if they don't, check out all their great stuff over at cherrybundy.com. Use the promo code PFF20, and you will also get 20% off whatever your order is over at cherrybundy.com. If you are using their website specifically, you can get that 20% off by going over there. Dalton, let's talk about your next guy that you want to bring to the table, who really stood out to you on Wednesday.
You mentioned with Bech where it's, okay, I don't know if any of these defensive backs are going to want to see him again. I don't know if there's any offensive linemen that are going to want to see A&M edge defender Shemar Stewart again the rest of this week, because he is just dominating everybody. The combination of length and power at 6'5", 280, he was unblockable again today. He gets that leverage going. It's just incredible. The power in the one-on-ones was unstoppable. Had a strip sack in the team period, couple other pressures, really some good work against Emory Jones from LSU.
Yep.
Shemar Stewart, it feels like he's starting to solidify his status as a first-round pick. Obviously, the build and everything, he looks like a prototype defensive end, right? And, you know, at Texas A&M this year, just an outstanding run defender, too. We saw that all year. But for him to come out and show in one-on-ones and in the team period the pass rush prowess that he's got going right now at his size, he's starting to feel like if he has another day like this tomorrow, he might be a lock first-round pick. Shemar Stewart's been absolutely unblockable. And, you know, tomorrow, I don't know if there's anybody volunteering to go up against him, honestly. And especially with as few true offensive tackles as it feels like we have here, and guys rotating positions, inside, outside, trying to figure it out. Shemar Stewart has it figured out against everybody he's going against. He's been unblockable, and he's probably going to be again tomorrow.
Yeah, I think Shemar Stewart, him against Emory Jones was my favorite matchups all day. Because you mentioned before the strip sack he had against him. And I think the very next play, Emory Jones actually buried him. Like the one bad play Shemar Stewart had the entire day, honestly. But
that's a good fight from Emory Jones.
Big fight from Emory Jones. They were going at it, honestly. And hand up, listen, I watched Shemar Stewart's tape. I was a little lower on him than the consensus. And I came out here and some people were asking me, what do you think about Shemar Stewart? I was like, I don't really know. Then I watched him out here today. I'm like, man, I might not know what I'm talking about. Because Shemar Stewart was unbelievable today, honestly. But it's a high ceiling with him, and you're seeing him kind of tap to that ceiling right now this week.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're totally off, because, you know, I watch Shemar Stewart, and it's kind of the same way. If you're just watching his film and you're grading everything that goes into being a good edge rusher, and that includes not only great athletic ability, great length, but also technique, and do you have a pass rush plan and things like that, that is a lacking part of his profile. Now, he's one of the younger players that we have in this draft class. He's only a true junior, so I think all of those things go into account. And going back to what we were talking about at the top of the show, this event is an event where, first and foremost, you're just trying to see who's an NFL player and who isn't. And when you watch Shemar Stewart, of course, we would love to see a little bit more technical wins for him. But at the end of the day, it's like, all right, well, this is somebody who predominantly wins off athleticism right now, right? What does it look like when he's doing that in an event like this? Mm-hmm. Does that still stand out at a high level? And it does. So to me, that showcases like, okay, let's say you don't turn into a prolific pass rusher.
Yeah.
What you are, even in this state, still incredibly valuable. Now, I think about Jadeveon Clowney, right? Where Clowney, when he was coming out of South Carolina, now I think that he was a better run defender right now than what Shemar Stewart is. But it's sort of the same conversation because Clowney goes number 1 overall basically just off of traits.
Yeah.
He never, when he was throughout his NFL career, he never became this like technical pass rusher. He wasn't this, crazy pass rush win percentage type of a player, consistently double-digit sacks type of a guy. But you still draft a player like that number 1 overall, Houston Texans did, because of what they were able to see and goes, okay, well, even if he never gets better, this is the type of player that we're getting, and we think that we're comfortable there taking him at number 1 overall. I don't think that Shemar Stewart's going to go number 1 overall, but I do think that it sort of brings back the first-round conversation. I think he's a first-round lock type of a player, even in his current form from what we're seeing right now.
And I think it shows, especially as good as all those Texas A&M guys were in run defense this year, you have a super high floor. So let's say even if he's a guy who gives you 8 or 9 sacks a year, and if it's not 15, 16, 17 like the elite guys, you still get an elite run defender, a B-to-B plus pass rusher, and you've got a fantastic football player who makes your defense a lot better in each facet.
Max, who we got next?
I got to go with a PFF darling.
Let's go.
And Willie Lampkin.
Let's go.
And the executive director of the Senior Bowl, Jim Nagy, I think a few days ago even tweeted out and said, hey, any PFF fans, we got a special one coming for you guys. And he got invited to this Senior Bowl very late.
I think it was the last ad.
Literally the last ad to the Senior Bowl. He's the offensive guard from North Carolina, if you know him, playing kind of a little bit of center today. Trevor, he's 5'10", 270 pounds. He is, I looked it up, 3 inches shorter than any offensive lineman that's ever measured in. And he's about the second lightest offensive lineman ever as well. Usually you hear that and you think, okay, this guy's going to come out here and struggle. He has been holding his own against some of a really good defensive tackle group that we have here at the Senior Bowl. He's holding his own against some of the best ones like Deion Walker, who is 9 inches taller and 70 pounds heavier than Willie Lampkin. Walter Nolan, 5 inches taller, 23 pounds heavier. He's got the natural pad level. I know it's going to be said a lot with Willie
Leverage
Lampkin.
king.
Yeah, leverage is king.
Leverage
but
is king.
He's dominant, man. And the reason why Jim Nagy said, PFF fans are going to love this one, he was the highest graded guard in the Power 4 this past season in North Carolina, highest pass blocking grade in the Power 4, second highest run blocking grade in the Power 4. I get it. He's 5'10", 270 pounds, quite literally the smallest offensive lineman ever if he does play in the NFL. Trevor, I want to ask you, where do you think he even plays in the NFL if he can play that high? Because he's shown out here that he can hold his own against some of the best guys.
I wouldn't play him at guard.
No.
He just doesn't weigh enough for the position. But I am very intrigued with what he could be as a center. To me, he is this. I think you play him at center, but even if he's not the starting center for you, there's this weird, because of how well he moves, there's this weird you could play him at fullback on short yardage situations, like goal line situations, third and short situations. He could be a lead blocker for you. So there's can you think about this guy of technically like a 6th offensive lineman out there, but you put him in like a wingback formation and he's like the split zone blocker coming behind the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
It's just given how well he has been able to stand up here this week, it makes him very intriguing.
Yes.
I think before this, you look at just the measurables and you say, this is an undrafted free agent.
You cross him off the list.
Right,
yeah.
He's not going to get drafted. But, Dalton, I'm curious if you feel the same way, but it's I think this is now a player that I'm more intrigued than I ever have been with his measurables, because not only do I think, okay, you could maybe play center at the NFL level, now I think you could play as a blocking tight end. You could play as a blocking fullback. You could have a lot of creativity with a player like this.
Well, we've seen Jim Harbaugh do it with a guy like Scott Matlock. You've mentioned to us Patrick Ricard before, somebody like that.
Right.
I do have half a mind to wonder, could he play defense? Could he get on the defensive line and use that leverage? We've seen O linemen and D linemen switch before. Pete Carroll, I think, who was it? Was it J.R. Sweezy that he used to have?
J.R. Sweezy.
He was a D lineman, then he moved over to guard.
O-line.
Maybe you go the other way. That's the last thought I have is, maybe if he could play defense. Now, the only problem is then length, and you always talk about tackling. Even I think about, he's legitimately smaller than a guy like Kalijah Kancey, who's considered among the smallest among D tackles. So maybe that wouldn't work. He's a little too heavy to play linebacker, so you couldn't do that. But it just
maybe not.
Maybe we're just doubting it. Look,
just put him in the middle in a 3-4 where you got 4 outs, where you got 2 inside linebackers, and just have him just run at the pocket every time.
It's one of those guys who you just go, that's a football player. I don't know how I'm gonna get at. I don't know how I'm gonna go about it until we get him in the locker room. But,
I'm with you.
And honestly, the most fun part about it is every single rep of his here has become appointment viewing.
Yes.
You can't take your eyes off him unless he's standing behind somebody and you can't see him. But I mean, it's unbelievable how he's standing up to some of the best players in this class and competing at a high level.
Yep, just 3 inches shorter than any offensive lineman we've ever seen. And he's still out here competing like that. I mean, it's incredible what we're seeing from Willie Lampkin. Shout out the Short Kings right now. That's why I had to shout him out ultimately.
Shout out the Short
You're
King.
one of them. Yeah.
No, that is whoa, easy, man. I didn't know we were getting stray bullets out here. That guy's trying to praise somebody.
I'm used to doing it on the college show.
6'1" on my Tinder profile, but it's fine. Yeah.
Oh, that's why we love you. All right, so the guy that I want to shout out here, a little bit shorter of a linebacker as well. Not quite the Short King that we were just talking about with Willie Lampkin, but Jeff Bassa, the linebacker from Oregon. I continue to be very intrigued by him because he measured in 6'1", 225 pounds. So he's a much lighter linebacker than you're sort of traditionally used to at the NFL level. But I think he just plays the way the linebacker position is going, where nickel is the new base, as they say, right? You're only having 2 linebackers on the field, and one of them better be able to cover. Mm-hmm. Both of them, honestly, better be able to cover, but you better have somebody that can cover pretty well. There's a couple of reps that he had one-on-ones today where, yeah, okay, one-on-one with a running back in wide open space, you got no help. I mean, it's just destined to be cooked at that point. But there have been a couple of reps where he's anticipated it really well. He's at least been able to wall the halfback off in those passing drills. He covered a wheel route very nice up the sideline. Like this is somebody who, I have him as a top 80 player in this class. I've got him ranked 79th, and I think he's either linebacker 5, linebacker 6. I can't remember because I've added a couple of them over the last couple of weeks. But this is somebody that I'm very, very intrigued about. And the more that I looked into him, read some articles about him, Dan Lanning, who is one of the best football coaches in America, the head coach at Oregon. He knows football so well, comes from great Georgia defenses that he was a part of there. He's just had such high praise for Bassa and said, like, I mean, he is that quarterback of the defense type of a player. You know, he has just grown so much. He has matured so much. He's got so much wisdom for the game, playing linebacker the way that he has over the last couple of years. So when somebody like that, and I don't really think it was coach speak. I think it was genuine when he was talking about him like this. And he just seems like such a smart, athletic football player that you want in the middle of your defense. So Bassa, we've got some other linebackers in this class that a little bit more flashy. You get those headlines. Jahad Campbell's got that crazy edge build, but he plays as an off-ball linebacker. Carson Schweschinger from UCLA, he's so fast on the trigger, and he's got such great instincts. Demetrius Knight, I think, is a great combination of a lot of things: size, speed, athleticism, all that kinds of stuff. But Bassa is somebody who might be a little bit more streamlined, might be less universal, but somebody who I think can make a defense really happy with how well he can play in coverage at his size.
I think you're right that the athletic profile is off the charts. The big thing for me, especially, you watch him closely in these team periods, because I want to see his eye discipline and his path to the football, especially in the run game, right? He played next to a very good linebacker at Oregon, and Bryce Betcher, who's going back there next year. He was really the guy that filled the gaps and got off blocks well, while Bassa was kind of a run and chase weak side guy. I think if he can just read the offensive lines a little bit better, I'm curious to see him again have another good day in the team period tomorrow. That's where I'm looking, because athletically in the one-on-ones, I'm not all that surprised that he looked good there, because I think his athletic tools are as good as any linebacker in this class.
I love his tools, honestly, and I think, you see on his tape that he is, like you said, Dan Lanning said, he's a very high IQ player, and that's, listen, we're starving for linebackers in this draft, and starving in general in the NFL and college football as well. So I've been impressed by him as well, and I think, in a wide-open linebacker class like it is this year, he could absolutely be moving up boards. We got somebody in the chat who's asking about Taylor Elgersma, the quarterback from Canada, the quarterback from Laurel. And I didn't see him a lot today. Curious if you guys saw any of him today. I watched him a little bit yesterday.
felt a little hot and cold.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't mean to say that just to kind of like cop out with the answer. He was. It felt like there were a couple of throws where he was showcasing some pretty good arm strength. And there were other passes where he just didn't have the timing right with those wide receivers, didn't have the accuracy down, whatever it was. So I felt like it was an up and down, okay day for him on day one. Did you guys get eyes on him on day two at all?
I thought he was a little bit better yesterday. I thought it was a little spottier with the accuracy today. I think he's really got to have it. He's a tall, kind of classic pocket passer who's got to have his feet set in the pocket to make accurate throws. And honestly, out of the entire group, for the most part, I would like to see them throw the ball downfield more, especially in the team periods, like just to see, okay, who can get it downfield vertically. And we don't have a ton of guys outside of Jalen Milroe with necessarily rocket arms, but let's at least take the chance and maybe even with some good timing get the ball downfield. I thought he was a little better yesterday than today.
I would agree with that. I think almost every quarterback in this Senior Bowl has been a little inconsistent through the first 2 days so far. So he's had a little bit of hot and cold, like you said, as well. But there has been something there, right? Because we knew nothing about him coming into it, and you could see, okay, this is why he was invited to the Senior Bowl.
Milroe, you brought up Milroe. He had a really nice deep ball throw right in the corner of the end zone right next to us. But outside of that, man, I thought he had a worse day today. Well, I gotta and watch all of his snaps from today, but it felt like he even had a worse day than he did yesterday. I mean, the inconsistencies are really there for him. The accuracy is just not there for him this week, and I think that we've seen that on his tape over the last couple of years. So he's somebody that I know a lot of people are going to ask about just because he's so polarizing. The draft range is all over the place. Some people say, oh, you do not let a player like this get out of the first round, and other people go, I'm not drafting him until day 3. And I don't think he helped that first-round case this week. And no. At least through 2 days, in my opinion.
He reminds me a lot of like the Malik Willis conversation a couple of years ago, where some people had him as like a top 10 pick in the NFL draft,
and
some
he goes
people
third round.
He goes third round. So exactly right. So there was one rep today that I thought kind of encapsulated Milroe's weaknesses a lot. He basically got sacked. They didn't blow the whistle, and then he threw an interception right after. It just is a little late. It feels like at all times for him. So obviously extremely physically talented, the most physically talented quarterback that we have in the draft, but still the mental part of the game is still kind of getting along for him.
Yep. All right, we got 3 more guys that we're getting to, but before we get to those guys, got to ask you guys a question. What's your child's future success look like to you? Maybe it's a job that they're passionate about, traveling the world. Maybe it's just happy lifestyle when they have that financial freedom. Whatever it is, you can help their journey and make it easier for them to achieve that with a kids investment account from Fabric by Gerber Life. Making contributions to your child's future today can help give them the means to pursue their dreams, both big and small, whatever they are. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With a kids investment account from Fabric, you can start investing in your child's future today. Kids cannot invest while they're minors, but a kids investment account from Fabric allows you to invest on their behalf, giving their investments more time to grow. Whole thing's online. Setting up an account, very easy. Could take you just 5 minutes, and then you can just manage your child's account right from your phone. Very simple. Funds can be used for anything. Tutors, tuition, music classes, summer classes, whatever it is, or when they're adults, getting out on their own, buying a first house, buying a first car, starting a business, or traveling the world, whatever it is, whatever they need to make them happy. Whole thing is online. It's very easy to monitor, like I said, from the phone. Everything is very simple right there, right in front of you. Starts with just $20, no contribution limits, tax advantages, SIPC insured up to $500,000, plus no commission fees and a low flat monthly maintenance fee. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to protect their family. Start investing in your child's future today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. Portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. Learn more at meetfabric.com. Dalton, you've given us the Iowa State wide receivers, given us Shemar Stewart. Who's your final guy today that really stood out for you?
So we've obviously mentioned a lot of receivers, especially from the national team side, right? The 2 Iowa State guys, Tej Johnson, Xavier Restrepo yesterday, who I would love to talk about every day, but I won't do it today. It feels like for the national team in the morning practice, the DBs have really been overmatched for the most part in the first 2 days. It's a really talented receiver group they're going against. But I was impressed by one guy in that group, Louisville cornerback Quincy Riley. And I think this is a guy that I really liked coming into the season. And did we have him as a top 10 corner?
Yeah,
I think we did. Yeah. We had him as a top 10 corner coming into the college season this year. Great year at Louisville in 2023. Spent a couple years at Middle Tennessee before that. 85.3 coverage grade. This year, along with the rest of his defense, fell off a little bit. Kind of a basic heavy zone system where He still was breaking up passes, but there was a lot of lapses in coverage in between as a team. But Riley came out in man-to-man coverage today. I thought played really well. He was the one guy who could really compete with those two Iowa State guys. Had a big-time pass breakup against Jayden Higgins on a back shoulder throw. Had another pass breakup in the end zone. I believe it was against Daquan Felton from Virginia Tech. The very last rep of the day was actually him defending a go ball against Jaylin. Noel. The ball was thrown a little high, but Riley was in really good coverage. And I think for me, look, I don't think he's a super high ceiling guy. He spent 6 years in college football. He's a decent, maybe not elite athlete, but his experience and his smarts in man coverage today really showed up against, again, a very, very talented group of receivers on that national side. There's a boatload of good players, but he took the challenge of the best of them today against Higgins, against Noel. At times, like I mentioned, Daquan Felton, Restrepo's out there too. He's a guy, if he can show he can play in man-to-man as opposed to in zone. He's got 19 pass breakups over the last 2 seasons. He's a ball hawk as long as he's in phase. It was an issue during the season, but I thought this was the best I'd seen him look in a long time. And for that team, he was clearly the best corner on the field this morning.
Yeah, Quincy Riley, I remember a guy last year in Jaylin King who was coming off a down season, but the year before he was outstanding. It's good to see, and Jaylin King struggled at the Senior Bowl, I remember last year, where it's good to see Quincy Riley after, like you said, a little bit of a down year this past year, kind of show, hey, I am still the player I was back in 2023. Because, yeah, he was a guy that we loved coming into the year. And they played more man coverage, I think, in 2023 than they did this past year, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so, because this year they went full just sitting in cover 3, and they got beat up the seams and stuff a lot. It was a big drop in coverage with Louisville. Not that we're getting into a big college analysis, but it was just their entire team had a big drop-off in coverage, and we thought it would be a lot better defense, and obviously Riley's numbers are going to reflect that too. But I think he's a really talented player. I think he's a really smart football player, and to see him come out and compete against these receivers this morning better than really the entire group did yesterday, it was good to see from him.
And it's good to see, and it makes sense because here at the Senior Bowl during practice, they're not really running a lot of zone coverage, right? A lot of it is man-to-man stuff. So it's you could see why he was so good in 2023, honestly. And, yeah, I think as a man-to-man corner, I'm a big fan of Quincy Riley.
Who's your last guy you want to bring to the table?
I want to talk about one more edge defender, Donovan Ezeiruaku, who is just an awesome player overall. He is unreal bend. So he had another rep against Josh Connerly Jr. Connerly had I thought a good day overall, but there were a couple reps. Obviously, the one I said before with Mike Green, and then obviously with this one, Donovan Ezeiruaku. We got around Josh Connerly Jr. with unreal bend. Really an inside counter move I saw as well from Donovan Ezeiruaku. Kind of encapsulates him as a player. So his pass rush plan might be among the best, if not the best, of any edge defender, I think, in this draft. 6'2", but he has like 34-inch arms as well, so you got the natural pad level plus the long arms. He was an All-American for us this past season at PFF. He led the Power 4 in sacks in the regular season and led the Power 4 in run defense stops in the regular season as well. So really good run defender, really good pass rusher, and just the fact that he has a plan as a pass rusher. That is what I was really impressed by, just the counter moves when the initial move didn't work. I mean, Donovan Ezeiruaku is just a very high floor edge rusher, in my opinion.
What was it, 3 years ago? So not this past year, not the year before, but the year before that, when he was a contributor for the first time at Boston College. I think he had like 8.5 sacks, something like that. And then the year after he had 2. And I remember reading the story of he was pissed. He was pissed off about how he played that year. And then he came back and 16.5 sacks this year or something like that. It was something crazy. Very productive football player. Knows how to win in a lot of different ways. Yeah, he's a little bit smaller, but to me, coming into this week, I love him. I have him as edge rusher number 8 coming into this week. I'm
a loaded class, too. It's not saying a lot.
Yes. And I am a big fan of his. And the question that I had is just how much power do you play with? Can you play with a little bit more power, weighing a little bit less? You clearly win with the finesse. You win with your hands. You win with the plan. How much power do you have? Because it is a big people beats up little people game once you get to the pros. And there is a power prerequisite that you have to be able to showcase those finesse things. So I was looking to see that. Today I felt like he played with better power than he did yesterday, which I loved. And you go back to the run defense grades. That makes me feel like, okay, he's got it there. We've seen that. I just need to see it in more ways. Because sometimes guys are a little bit more, they're built a little bit more dense, and so like stopping the run or playing with power is a little bit just easier for them to do. With Ezeiruaku, I think it's got to be something he anticipates well, but when he does, I feel like he can play with that power, and I agree with you. I felt like we saw a really good day from him today. So I was happy to see that.
No, I think the two things you guys just mentioned, you just mentioned anticipation, you mentioned a pass rush plan. This is a guy who thinks about what he wants to do as the game is going on, right? And you see he's one of those closers in the fourth quarter who comes up with the counter moves. He's got a deep arsenal. And I was actually curious. I thought he had a decent day yesterday, right? He wasn't one of the elite players out here as the O-line was dominating everybody. But I was like, he's one of those guys who might get better as the week goes on because he's seeing the same guys over and over, right? And we're talking about, okay, he saw this from me yesterday, so now I'll come back with this, and I'll feign this. And, I mean, it just knows how to sequence as a pass rusher. And even in the run game, the same principle can apply. I remember Latu talking about at the Combine last year, secondary run defense moves even. When you talk about, okay, I can't just hard set the edge every single play, right? Mm-hmm. We got to come up and even, if I'm engaged, I got to come up with other moves, even layering that second level in run defense. I think Ezeiruaku, the fact that he gets better as the game goes on because he has that plan mentally is a big part of his game.
Last guy I'm going to bring up, I'll stick with the defensive line theme that we have here on this show. Femi Oladejo from UCLA has really stood out to me. I did not know a lot about him going into this week. I had seen some of the PFF grades and some of the production from him. I knew his background a little bit. He played at Cal, and then he goes over to UCLA, played off-ball linebacker last year. This year, he started at off-ball linebacker, but then he moved to edge very quickly into the season. This is a team that is losing Latu, the Murphy twins, and so they just needed consistent edge rush play. And you'd think that for a guy who is playing off-ball linebacker, moving to the edge, okay, well, is he really built for that? I think he's built more like an edge anyways. And he was an edge rusher recruit when he was coming out of high school. And so that just goes into his profile a little bit more. But over 6'2", pretty good weight to him, over 33.5-inch arms. So pretty good length for the edge rush position. And he's somebody who popped a little bit for me yesterday on Tuesday. There was a nice move. I can't remember the offensive lineman that he was going up against, but he had a very nice, very precise, clean, two-handed swipe to get around the offensive lineman, disengage the hands, and then just get around the outside shoulder. Now, the bend wasn't the best. It wasn't the tightest corner, but his hands were so fast and violent and powerful to get clean, it didn't really matter. He was able to still get by the outside shoulder because the offensive lineman had no chance to grab him because his hands were over here. So I saw that and I was like, okay, very intrigued by this player from that rep alone. Today, I felt like I saw more of the same. I mean, he was able to showcase a really nice club arm over when he was playing as a 4-eye, odd front defensive end against a guard. So there have been a couple of one-on-one splash plays from him, and he's not somebody whose name I've heard much throughout this draft cycle, but Femi Oladejo from UCLA, he's somebody that you guys should have on your radar. I'll get him in the mock draft simulator as soon as I get some more eyes on him after this event, but he's somebody who really stood out to me as well.
My favorite thing about the Senior Bowl is going back and having to watch guys like that, right? Because I'll admit, here on the PFF College Football Show, UCLA was not a great football team this year. So Dalton and I did not really watch a lot of UCLA tape this year. But after the Senior Bowl, like you mentioned, Oladejo is a guy that I think both of us are going to have to go back and watch because he has been, like I said, he's just shown more than I think anyone really expected out of him this week. And he's going to make a lot of people, not just us, go back and watch tape on him.
It makes me wonder with his role, when you talk about, okay, experience at linebacker, experience at edge, it feels like we're seeing more players, say, like a Frankie Louvu for the Commanders, or I think about even when Nakobe Dean was healthy, the Eagles were doing this with Zach Bond. Some guys who have experience at both, you can mess around with the fronts a little more if a guy can capably play the edge. Instead of bringing a fifth defensive lineman out there, now you go, okay, let's stand him up off the edge, and we'll kind of go sometimes with a 5-1. We can bring a safety down. It makes it a little more versatile for your personnel on defense if you have a guy like that that's at least adequate at both.
All right, that's the 9 that we have that we wanted to talk about. There's some people in the chat who are asking about some other players. Donnie said Mason Taylor, thought Mason Taylor had a really good day from what he was watching. Clay Webb as well. Any thoughts on either of those guys?
Clay Webb's a really, really fun football player. He's a guy that also grades out really well in the PFF system at Jacksonville State over the last couple of years. And I thought in one-on-ones today, he really held his own as well. So, again, another guy that it's good to see those guys coming from Conference USA show out against some of the best D tackles in the country. Yeah.
I thought Mason Taylor has looked good as well. I thought there were a handful of reps where he was able to be as advertised, right? I mean, like he's a bigger receiving tight end, so you want to see him win in those ways. I didn't think that he was, we talked about Elijah Arroyo from Miami yesterday, and I don't think Mason Taylor is winning as dominantly as like an Elijah Arroyo was, but still there have been a handful of throws that have gone his way that I think he was able to come down with. And if you were a fan of Mason Taylor before this event, those are reps that you look at and you go, see, there you go, I told you about it. Oh, Donnie also said Demetrius Knight.
Your guy.
My man.
Yeah.
My man. There was a play in the scrimmage portion where it was a handoff. Running back kind of gets through the line of scrimmage, and then he is just met with a strong shoulder from Demetrius Knight, who knocks him all the way back and on the ground. And Demetrius Knight gives him a little. Just had to let him know. I thought Eugene Asante as well, who has been a linebacker. He was a special teams guy for a long time when he was with Auburn, and then he got the linebacker spot over the last 2 years. He's here at the Senior Bowl, which is cool to see. He's all energy. I mean, he is first team all energy here at the Senior Bowl, and I think that he'll probably get picked as one of those linebackers that is more of a special teamer than somebody that's actually going to crack the starting rotation. But those two linebackers really stood out for me, even beyond Bassa.
I'll throw you a third one I thought had a better day than yesterday. Jack Kaiser from Notre Dame. And
he's our guy.
He's I'll tell you what, anytime I watch him, when he pulls the trigger, he's blazing fast.
Yes.
I mean, and they weren't going to the ground today, so there was some plays where he got to the spot and didn't necessarily get a chance to finish, but there was probably a half dozen plays where Kaiser was flying first one of the football, and that's really what we saw a lot. Maybe his side-to-side agility and that first step, turning his hips needs a little bit of work, but when he gets going, I think he's an absolute weapon at linebacker. He's one of my favorite guys in this
100%.
class.
It's his speed, and he sees the field at such a ridiculously high level.
Would he play? Would he play 72 games or something? What was it?
Yeah.
Wasn't he going for almost had the record of most games played in college football? It was 73, something like that.
Before this year, he did, but the snap counts weren't all that high because they kind of rotated him in. Before this year, where he really became the true starting middle linebacker for Notre Dame, even in 2023 he might have been the highest graded linebacker in the country, but he played 350 snaps because they kind of rotate through some guys. This year, Jack Kaiser was on the field every snap. Him and Drake Bowen. It was those two guys. We'll hear about Drake Bowen in a couple of years too. Great young player, but Kaiser really got a full-time shot this year, and that's what I wanted to see. He was spectacular again during the season after a couple of early season games to adjust to that role. But I think that's what you want to see from him is the durability and the speed holding up long term instead of just being a part-time weapon.
We got a couple more names that people were wondering if we had any thoughts on them. Ja'Cory Brooks is one. Ty Felton is another one. Jalen Rivers. So I thought Jalen Rivers had a great day yesterday. I thought, again, the offensive line took a step back in general today just because the defensive line, I think, punched back in a lot of ways. But, man, Jalen Rivers looked great. Guy who's played at offensive tackle for Miami.
I like him a lot at guard.
Played at guard. Really he looked great at guard.
I thought he looked fantastic in his reps at guard today, and I think he's going to stay there. And you know what? Honestly, he might be working his way. We got to figure out if we're going to do all interior or probably put them together with the centers, but he might be a top 10 interior guy with the way he's playing at guard right now. He's been looked really, really good through 2 days.
Yeah, talk about Ty Felton a little bit. He's a guy who is excellent after the catch at Maryland, but here you can't really showcase that too much. But I thought his route running showed a lot of improvement today. That was kind of
today versus yesterday?
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't notice him a lot yesterday, but he had a couple of nice catches today.
He had a couple nice catches, and I think he has good speed for the position as well. Ty Felton's a guy that, yes, this is not really an event designed for his strengths, considering he is so good after the catch. But I thought he showed a lot more route running chops, even on tape, than he showed at Maryland.
You got a shout out in the chat for Josh Farmer from FSU. And I mean, I did not know a lot about him coming into the event. I haven't watched his final eval yet, but I mean, he's had a couple of reps. One today, in general, that sticks out to my mind that was one of the cleanest reps that we had for the one-on-one group between defensive line and offensive line. So he is definitely somebody who was gaining a lot of hype before we got to this event. That's at least putting out a couple of good splash plays that I've seen, but I got to go back and watch all this.
Daniel Jeremiah has him top 40, right?
I know.
On his new big board right now. And the big thing with him is he's a massive individual, and he moves well at that size as well. And he showed it off in the one-on-ones.
We got a couple of people in the chat asking us about Willie Lampkin, Mike Green. We have talked about those guys a little bit earlier in the show, so you guys can go back and watch our full thoughts on that. But the last question that I have here, who do you think is the biggest winner so far over the last 2 days, Gray Zabel or Mike Green?
I think Zabel.
I think
there was a lot of hype.
I think Zabel, because I don't think that Zabel was known as anything close to a first-round pick before this. I think people were like, oh, yeah, early third, second-round type of a pick. Genuinely, this guy's playing well enough to where, I think we're getting close to talking about him like we talked about Graham Barton.
Green could have sat out of the Senior Bowl and still been a first-round pick. Gray Zabel's a guy who made a lot of money.
I would agree.
I think Mike Green's kind of proving it right now. Gray Zabel's a guy, I mean, you mentioned before, comes from the FCS level, played tackle at North Dakota State. Now he's playing on the interior at the Senior Bowl against some of the best players in the country, and he's still dominating out here. So I think he's made a lot of money this week.
What do you think, Dalton?
Especially against the level of competition where we've talked about how much talent is on the defensive line in this draft class and at this Senior Bowl. To hold up the way he has, and you mentioned it yesterday, at center, at left guard, at right guard, it really does not matter. He's got experience at tackle. He's really athletic, especially for an FCS player. He's held up so well, and he was, for as much as the defensive line started to win the battle a little bit more today, Zabel was still rock solid. He's been incredible for 2 days.
All right, there we go. That's our recap on day 2 coverage here at the Senior Bowl. We got one more day, one more recap show. As we've tried to do over the last couple of shows, we try to get you guys in the chat involved as well. So we're going to have a recap same time tomorrow. Make sure you guys are watching and getting in on the chat. We can give you our full thoughts on how these guys have practiced after 3 straight days. So we'll be going back and forth with you guys as much as possible, plus giving you guys the players that, of course, we are pointing out as big highlights as well. For Dalton Wasserman, Max Chadwick, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you so much for watching the PFF NFL show. See you guys tomorrow.